started streaming. Here we go. What's up, everyone? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Got a little different setup here for today's live stream. Got the piano here, so you guys can actually see. I have so many people say in the comments, this has been forever, hey, why don't you have a piano that you demonstrated on? It'd be so much easier to see with the piano layout to understand music theory. So I have a few different things here. So I got my piano, I got my right here, I can type things in, and we're going to learn music theory off the piano, visualizing it. Okay, so what I want to do here, we're going to start and talk about what you do to a scale to create chords first and then scales, okay? So right here we have, we're going to use the key of C. So that's a C major scale. So all the white notes, right? These are the notes we're going to use. And those notes are going to be represented by the numbers 1 through 7. So basically what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about how to create chords based on this numbering system in relation to the major scale, okay? We're going to start with a C major chord. The C major chord has the notes C, E, and G, or we're going to say this is going to be 1, 3, 5. Okay, so it's the first note of the scale, the third note, and the fifth note. As you can see, it's every other note of the major scale there, at least in the triad. The first 3 notes that occur, you skip one at a time. So 1, 3, 5. Okay, now, if I were to take this, we're going to base these things off this. All right, so I'm going to make this a minor chord. To make it a minor chord, I flat the third. Now the third is referring to the third note in the scale, this note E. Okay, so I'm going to flat it to make it a C minor chord. So, okay, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to put flat third. Okay, so that's a minor chord is 1, flat, 3, 5. Okay, minor, major, minor. Okay, I have bad allergies. I'm probably going to sneeze here in a second, so it's like the worst time. By the way, the sale for today's live stream, discount code for the Beato Book bundle, Beato Book YouTube, Instagram transcription bundle, which is about 675 pages, something like that. PDF is RB500. Is that right, Billy? Yep. That's also 30% off or $60 off the ear training program. So this is a great time to get it. And my book has all this stuff in it, but I want to talk about it here so you can visualize it. That's the only thing, is that you use lectures like this on the live streams to help you as you're reading through the book, help you visualize and memorize these things, okay? Okay, so our minor chord is 1, flat, 3, 5. Now, here are the other triads that we use. This is the sus4 triad, okay? Sus4 triad would be 1, 4, 5, right? So you get C, F, G, right? So you have the first note of the scale, the fourth note of the scale, the fifth note of the scale. So that's how this works, okay? Then we have sus2. A sus2 would be 1, 2, 5, all right? The first note of the scale, second note of the scale, fifth note of the scale. You guys see how this works? So that's sus2. Okay, now there's 2 other triads that use the root and the fifth, okay, that I talk about. One is the Lydian triad that comes from the Lydian mode. It's 1, sharp 4, 5. That is called a Lydian triad. That's what I've always called it a Lydian triad. So 1, sharp 4, whoops. Where's sharp here? It's under 3. Sharp 4, 5. There we go. 1, sharp 4, 5 is a Lydian triad. And 1, flat 2, 5, so is what I call a Phrygian triad, okay? 1, flat 2. Right here's our natural 2. This is our flat 2. We've moved it down a half step. When you flat a note, you move it down a step. If you sharp a note or raise a note, you move it up a half step. Okay, so here's your sus4. This is your Lydian triad. So it's really like a sus sharp 4. What suspended means is that you suspend the 4th there. That's sus4. So I'm suspending it because it really wants to resolve down to the 3rd. Or a sus2, that's a suspended 2nd there. That D, it wants to resolve up to the major chord, right? sus4 wants to resolve down to major. sus2 wants to resolve up to major. But in popular music, in jazz and everything, you know, when you listen to songs, you hear sus chords all the time. You constantly are hearing sus chords. They're very common. sus2 chords, sus4 chords, whatever. They're just used that way. You'll hear a C sus4. You can also have sus chords. Let's say I can, let's say I have a C sus2, but I put A in the bass. Ba. Okay, so I put A in the bass there. And that gives me an A minor 11 chord. This would be A minor 7, A minor 11. A minor 7 is a C major chord with an A in the bass. A minor 11 is a C sus2 chord with an A in the bass. Okay? Okay, so these are the basic triads. Now we also have the augmented and diminished triads. Let's talk about those. Let's talk about augmented first. So when you augment something, you raise it. So augmented implies a raised 5th. Okay, so I took the 5th of the chord, G, and I raised it a half step to be a G sharp. So you have 1, 3, sharp 5 is an augmented chord. 1, 3, and then sharp 5. That's augmented. So that would be C augmented there. Here's a little trick about augmented chords. If you take an augmented chord, if I take this note C and I move it up the octave, this chord then becomes an E augmented chord. And if I take the E and move it up the octave, it becomes an A flat augmented chord. So C augmented, E augmented, and A flat augmented are all the same 3 notes, but they're actually called different things, right? This is C, E, G sharp. This is E, G sharp, B sharp, okay? This is A flat, C, E, okay? So it's A flat here. Even though they are the same 3 notes, to the ear, they all sound the same, right? Pretty interesting. Okay, so that's an augmented chord. Now a diminished chord, the spelling of a diminished chord is 1, flat 3, flat 5. Okay, so if you take your 1, 3, 5, I'm going to flat the 3rd, I'm going to flat the 5th. That's a diminished chord. So C, E flat, G flat. Here's C major, 1, 3, 5, 1, flat 3, flat 5. That's a diminished triad. Okay? Now, if we start adding sevenths on this, okay, let's say you got 1, 3, 5, 7. Okay, so you got 1, 3, 5, 7. This would be a C major 7 chord, okay? That's all major 7th chords are 1, 3, 5, 7 of a major scale. All right, so this here, C, first note of the scale, 3rd note of the scale, 5th note of the scale, 7th note of the scale. Once again, all this stuff is in my Beato book. It's right in the beginning. It starts with intervals and goes right into how to build scales and chords. Basics. I mean, it literally starts right at the beginning. So it's spelled out in this way. And this is this concept here of what you do to a major scale to get different scales and different chords is a common concept that people have been using for, you know, the last, I don't know, 60 years or so at least, okay? So this would be a major 7. Now, if I want to make it a minor 7, you'd think, okay, well, just make this a minor, make it a flat 3rd. No, well, that actually would be a minor major 7, okay? So that's a minor chord, which would be 1, flat 3, 5 with a major 7. A minor 7th chord actually has a flat 7 on it, okay? So that would be 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7. That would be a minor 7 chord. Okay, there's your flat 7. But this would be a minor major 7. The reason it's called minor major 7 is because That's a major 7 interval there, okay? There's your minor 7. If I were to make it a dominant 7th is 1, 3, 5, flat 7. There's your dominant 7th chord. 1, 3, 5. So it's a C major chord with a flatted 7th on it. That would be the note B flat there. Okay, so that's a dominant 7th chord. Okay, we talk about minor 7. Then we have the minor 7 flat 5. Okay, minor 7 flat 5 would be 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7. 1, flat 3, flat 5. Oh, what do you notice about that? Well, that's a diminished chord. That's a C diminished chord. And there's a flat 7. So 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7. Okay, now, well, what is a diminished 7th chord? A diminished 7th chord has what we call a diminished 7th interval here. Okay, you'd say, well, that's a 6. Well, it is a 6 to the ear. 1, flat 3, flat 5 to the 6, really. But it's really called a double flatted 7th. So you literally just put 2 flats. This would be a major 7, flat 7, double flatted 7. So double flatted 7th to the ear is the 6th. Once again, discount code RB500. 50% off the Beato book, Instagram, YouTube, transcription bundle, 675-page PDF. Get it today and start working on your music theory, and 30% off or $60 off the ear training program. Same discount code, RB500. Is that right, Billy? RB500? Yeah. Okay, so that's a diminished 7th chord. 1, flat 3, flat 5, double flat 7. I love having the piano on here. How great is this with the piano on the screen? Aaron actually helped set this up. I've been wanting to do this forever. And he said, oh, you need this software? And I said, oh, where do I get the software? And then he looked, and it was already on my computer. So, all right. So, yeah, so it's a 675-page PDF. I think that's what it is, right, Billy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a diminished 7th chord there. All right. So any kind of scale, those are the and then we get into the augmented chords, okay? So 1, 3, sharp 5. So let me put this in there. 1, 3, sharp 5. If I do augmented major 7 right there, that's a common chord in jazz, but you hear that in classical music, film composing a lot. That's called an augmented major 7. Then you can have an augmented with a flat 7. That's called an augmented dominant chord. Okay, so that would be 1, sharp 5, flat 7. This is just memorization, these little formulas. If you know the basic triads, major, augmented, minor, diminished, sus4, Lydian, sus2, Phrygian. All these things in my ear training course are drilled. You literally, after we learn that's a perfect 5th interval, that's a perfect 4th interval. Once you master intervals, ascending and descending, then we go to chords. And there's a whole section on triads and recognizing them. Major triad, minor triad, sus4 triad, Phrygian triad, Lydian triad, sus2 triad. Being able to recognize those by ear, along with being able to recognize the interval relationship in the bass note. If I go from this note, if I'm the bass, I say, okay, that's down in minor 3rd, so that's C to A. Oh, that's down to the note F there. So 1, 6 minor, possibly 4 major, 5 major, 1 major. Okay, so this is how this ear training works, is that you recognize the interval relationship of the bass, and then you learn to recognize these basic triads. F major, you know the 1 chord, oh, that's 4 chord. Oh, that's 5 chord. 1 chord. 6 chord. 4 chord. 5 chord. 1 chord. Okay? So being able to pick these things out All this stuff is related. Visualizing, when I'm doing intervals, I'm visualizing them on the keyboard. Even though I'm a guitar player, well, I play keyboards too, obviously. Even though I'm a guitar player, I'm still visualizing these things on the keyboard because that, to me, is what makes sense. Because the way that it's laid out, it's very easy to see those intervals. When I see that, and I know that's a flat 6 or minor 6 interval. That's a major 6th interval. Major 7th interval, flat 7 or minor 7 interval. Okay, I think of them in both ways. That's why knowing how to spell these chords and scales is really important. Let's talk about scales here. Let's go back to numbering them. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, now, to build scales, let's say we're learning modes or something. This is a pretty easy concept once it's laid out like this. So if I have a major scale, once again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And those are literally the notes of C major, okay? If I flat the 3rd and flat the 7, that becomes the Dorian mode, okay? So what do you do to a major scale to get a Dorian, to get the Dorian mode or a Dorian scale? You flat the 3rd and flat the 7. These are how modes work. So you just memorize these things. So that would be Dorian. All right. If I flat let's say I just have a major scale and I just flat the 7, it sounds like this. Okay, that's the Mixolydian mode. Mixolydian mode is a major scale with a flat 7. Whoops, mix. Whoops, I guess it doesn't do an X. Okay, that does a double sharp. Interesting. Well, I guess it does X like that. It does a capital X. That's Mixolydian mode. If I, let's say, flat the, I'm going to flat the 6. I'm flat the 3rd. This, with a flat 3rd, flat 6, and flat 7, that's the Aeolian mode. Okay? Aeolian mode has a flat 3, flat 6, flat 7. Let's say I have a major scale with a sharp 4. If I take a major scale and I raise the 4th, that's going to be sharp 4 like this. That's going to sound. That is the Lydian mode or Lydian scale, however you want to think of it. Okay? And then let's see here. If I have a flat 2, flat 3, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7. No, let's not do a flat 5. Let's do a regular 5. This, 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. That is the Phrygian mode, okay? So Phrygian mode has a flat 2, flat 3, flat 6, flat 7. And the last mode of the major scale is the Locrian mode, and that has a flat 5th also. 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7. Now, interesting thing, let's say I go back to take this out of here. Boom, 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 boom. Let's go back. Let's say it's a Lydian. You guys know I like Lydian, and I interviewed Joe Satriani this past week, and Joe loves Lydian, as I do. I use things that I call like Lydian voicings, right? So Lydian voicing would be something, let's say a C Lydian voicing. Okay, so, it doesn't hold the things down. I wish it did. Okay, so what did I play here? I have C, G, or I could do this. So this is a C major chord, C, E, or C, G, E, F sharp. I could put D up there. That would be what I would call a Lydian voicing, okay? Or, ooh, that's beautiful. So you have 1, 2, sharp 4, 5, 1, 5, 3. There's your Lydian note. That gives you Lydian sound. Or I could say, okay, what about Aeolian? Well, what notes are in Aeolian? Aeolian has got a flat 3rd. You guys like this, right? This is fun. Actually, I'm having fun. So, once again, let's say I play an Aeolian voicing. let's see, something like this. I'm going to do this here. This would be a very simple one here. So I've got 1, 5, flat 6, flat third, and let me put the seventh in there. That would be a great, nice Aeolian, simple Aeolian voicing. So I have the 1, 5, flat 6, flat 7, flat third. You don't have to have every note of the scale in there, but that's a really nice spacing for an Aeolian chord. If I played it down the octave like this, beautiful sound there. There's my minor spread triad. 1, 5, flat 3, flat 6, flat 7, flat 3. Or I could go da. Put the ninth in there, or the second. So 1, 5, flat 3, flat 6, flat 7, 2. So that would be an Aeolian voicing. So I use these things called modal voicings all the time. You hear it in film scoring. You hear it in all different types of music. You can play these things on the guitar. They work great on with all different instruments. But what you want to do with this stuff is to be able to visualize these, is to memorize what you do to a major scale to create basic triads, seventh chords, and then modes, all right? I like to start with C major because it's really easy to visualize a C major scale and what you do to it to get these different scales and chords. Once again, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, those 7 notes right there, right? There's your 7 notes of your major scale. If I flat the third, that gives you a minor major 7 chord or scale. This gives you a Dorian sound. It's kind of interesting. It sounds cool together. That's Aeolian. That's an Aeolian scale played all together, right? This would be a Lydian scale played all together. That sounds beautiful. Especially if I go down the octave and play it, right? Or up the octave and play it. So, yeah, so my book has all these modes that has them written out in notation for piano, for any instrument, and it has it in tablature for guitar. All these things has both. Okay, so these are the basic building blocks for building chords, scales, things like that. I just saw in the comments, can you talk about a cluster? How do you build a cluster? A cluster would be, you could talk about a thing called an X cell. This is much more advanced, but let's say you have, typically a cluster is 4 chromatic notes in succession. When I think of a cluster, that's what I think of. Okay, so 4 chromatic notes. That would be this. That would be 4 chromatic notes. Now, if I were to spread those notes out, let's say I take the second note and put it up the octave, the C sharp, and then I take the, or maybe I voice it like that. That would be a cluster. It probably sounds like a cluster to you guys. That's pretty funny. But you have C, C sharp, D, E flat. Cool sound though. You hear that in a lot of horror movies, things like that. The theme to Psycho, the slashing sound is a cluster. It's an X cell. It's a 4-note chromatic cluster. You can have clusters with a lot of different, with even more notes chromatically in it. But typically, when people are talking about clusters, that's what they're talking about. RB500 is the discount code. It's 50% off my Beato book, YouTube, Instagram transcription bundle, which is 675-page PDF. And the ear training course is $60 off today. This is a great time to get it, to work on your ear, to be able to recognize these things. If I heard that chord, Da 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 da. Now I sang all the notes da 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 right in order, even though they were spaced like this. I hear them like da 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 da. Okay, these things are, they sound. Oh my God, I could never hear that. Yeah, you can. You actually can. If you practice these things enough, you can totally hear these things. I worked on this when I was. I started working on this when I was in college. I don't have perfect pitch. I didn't take ear training until my freshman year, second semester of college. I took ear training. And honestly, I didn't know what intervals were. I mean, I knew theory. I knew what scales were. I could improvise. I knew what modes were, but I didn't know. I didn't take a theory class. I didn't know what an interval was. I did not. Matter of fact, this numbering system here, I knew because my guitar teacher in high school taught me this, right? What do you do to a major scale to get these other scales? Sharp the 4 for Lydian, flat the 3rd, flat the 7th for Dorian, flat the 7th for Mixolydian, flat the 3rd, flat the 2nd, 3rd, 6th, and 7th for Phrygian. Just like that. And you just memorize it. Now, somebody said in here, Tyner fourth voicing explained. A fourth voicing, when people talk about fourth voicings, they're basically talking about stacked fourths. From the F to B flat is a perfect fourth, then B flat to E flat is a perfect fourth. Now, McCoy Tyner is a famous jazz piano player, and he would use these type voicings in his left hand a lot. I'd play, if I think of like sorry. And I play that voicing, that would be a Dorian sound, okay, to me. He would play those kind of, those fourth voicings like that. But they would be diatonic fourth voicings because he would use a voicing like that, which is an augmented fourth and a perfect fourth. So it's augmented fourth there, because that would be a regular fourth, augmented fourth, and then from here to here is a perfect fourth. So those are called modal voicings there. But those are fourth voicings that somebody like McCoy Tyner would use. Okay, stacked fourths, right? So understanding intervals. So if I were to say, okay, well, what is this chord? If I go, well, what is that? It's 1, 4, flat 7. Or and if I go down here, well, if I relate it to F major, there's F major, right? 1, 4, flat 7. That would be the major seventh in the key of F. That's a flat 7. 1, 4, flat 7. Or in the key of C, 1, 4, flat 7. So that's the formula for these things, right? That makes sense? Let me see if there's any other questions. Sounds like Bill Evans too. Yeah, I mean Miles Davis. When you hear "So What" with Bill Evans playing, they'd use that. People started using these fourth voicings back in. Initially, a lot of piano players got this stuff from impressionistic composers, Debussy, Ravel, people like that. You'd find even voicings like that in Chopin, but it really became commonly used in the. They would talk about things called planing. Planing is when you take a chord shape and you just move it. That would be planing, right? So so these guys then would use these kind of things they would use these things to comp in the left hand, right? And they would solo over those and play those fourth voicings there. That was just a common thing to do. McCoy Tyner really made an art form out of it. I mean, he was absolutely brilliant. But Bill Evans did it. A lot of piano players that followed. Chick Corea builds a lot of voicings that way, and it's I love that sound. It's a very powerful sound. To me, it reminds me of rock. And McCoy did this in when he was playing with John Coltrane. Did it? He did it for a certain period of time. He didn't do it always. He didn't always play voicings like that. That was not a thing. I think people just associate McCoy with that. He played for a certain period of time. He played voicings like that, and he's got some great classic tunes. One of my favorites is Passion Dance. It's off the Real McCoy record. That's in F Mixolydian, but he plays these fourth voicings, and it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Ron Carter, Joe Henderson, and Elvin Jones are the rhythm section. Ron is on bass, Elvin Jones on the drums, Joe Henderson on the sax, and obviously McCoy Tyner on the piano. If you want to hear a perfect demonstration of this chordal type voicings, that is a great record to have. You should definitely check out that record. It's one of my favorite records of all time. I think it came out in 1967, I believe. Billy, can you check that? The Real McCoy? Something like that. Probably 67. I think it was the late 60s. The Real McCoy?
The Real McCoy?
Yeah.
Where is that thing at?
Wonder if somebody else knows here faster. Okay. Anyways, it's in the 60s when I was a kid. 67. There we go. I'm usually pretty good on these things. All right. So you guys are amazing. That's all we're going to do for today. All this theory is in my Beato book. There's no better time than the present to learn it. You know what I used to tell my students back when I was a college professor? It's never too late to waste the rest of your life. But that was kind of my way of telling them that now is the time to do stuff, right? Now is the time. There's a great song with that title too. You should definitely know that. Anyways, all right, you guys are the best. Thank you. Have a great weekend. RB500 discount code. Thank you so much. Take care.